Hey, people. Drooly Booley asked me, have I done one on the book of James in the Greek? And I couldn't honestly answer that question without looking and reading a couple lines in the book of James because it's just not the same. What I'm reading is way different from the interpretation. In fact, there is no book of James in the Greek. It's called the book of Jacob, and it's a little more on the story of Jacob and Esau. That book of James was just an attempt for King James to write itself in the Bible, but you can see here in the Latin, it's a book of Jacob and Esau. And in the Greek, this book of James, James is spelled Jacob and Esau. They'll tell you that James was the brother of Jesus, the same as Jacob was the brother of Esau. And you see they got something right here. Jacob was black and Esau was red. Jacob is the father of Israel. And everybody from the Middle East would tell you, when the Jews left, they were black. When they came back, they were white. And the Hebrew word for this is niggas. And the men of Israel was niggas in the day. In the day, they always say this means, by them, on that day. We is the one talking, we is Israel, niggas in day. And so what it means, is Jacob was the black writings. And so if you've been watching my channel, I tell you that the old writings were the red. This is Esau or Jesus. That's the red letter Bible. Everything Jesus says is in red. And this was the tomb of Tutankhamun, taught the common knowledge of writings. And he's showing the difference between the black writing Jacob and Esau in the old writings. And it's fairly easy to tell that he's matching it up to a calendar here with the 12 months. And the Jacob as Theo, the God of heavens, and the cure, why Esau. And so this is Esau, but it's in the Hebrew it's spelled Ashu. And Ashu was the ancient doctor. You had Ashu and Ashipu. Ashipu was astrologer, Ashipu, and Ashu was the medical doctor. He was wise in herbs. And you see this word for brothers here, adel. And this isn't just brothers. These are noble brothers. The adel, the noble, and the O-I reads as a U, a come, the noble come of. The odel, that's the one that's going to inherit this state. That was supposed to be Esau, but it became Jacob. And the adel means that it was a noble family. It was a noble estate. Isaac pleaded with the Lord because his wife was barren. And when she conceived, she was struggling because of the sons, plural, within her. And you'll see in here, to usually give the reason for the names, and they will be leaders, literate, the leaders that. And the Lord said, there's 2 nations in your womb, 2 peoples from your body, a black one and a red one. And they shall be separated, apart. And one people shall be stronger, and the older shall serve, and a mix up instead of the younger serving the older. It's going to be the older, a mix where be bid. The I-O reads the E, where be bid, to serve, to abid. A biddits where, the O-I ring is a U, a biddits where. A mix where in a biddits where. And why men, the L followed by the A reads as an N, and a O-V, of. And why, how men of Jimmy. Jimmy is ancient Egyptian word for men of the cross. A Jimmy. Who men of Jimmy lied it. A Jimmy, is the cross. Two planks crossed and joined. Who men of a Jimmy and the double L, reading as the I or E, lied it, led it. Men of the cross led it. And weave, W-E-V-E, the N followed by the E, reading as a bet, a V. And weave a tummy, the double M, second one reading as an I, a tummy. Weave a tummy, invite, BB is VI, a vite in. Men of the cross, a black one and a red one. And come out the first ruddy all over like a cloak, hairy. So they called his name a shoe. And so they called him a shoe because he was ruddy all over like a cloak. And so what it is this word starts with the A, reads backwards. So it's, which is, the A followed by the E, reads as an ES. And which is hair ration in. Hair ration in. Hair ration in a meda, and co. Hair ration of medical. It was the ration of medicine. And which is hair ration in a medical, a code writ, all over like a cloak. It's cloaked. It's code writ. Not everybody can read it. And so, the Oashu and the Shipu, they carried the same book. It was the same writings, except the red knew the secrets in the reading. And they knew how to read the code in it, the code writ. It's the medical code writer, the code writer, and a fur of some a shoe, the doctor. And then afterward came out his brother, and his hand took hold on the heel of Esau. So was called his name Jacob, and that's coming from the heel, which is not the heel. The Vav Aleph, let me blow this up a little bit here. The Vav Aleph reads as a DE or a TE, and it's DE, the, and the hurry, and the hurricane, and afterward he's behind, he's in a hurry, and the hurricane it's so, trying to catch up, and backwards, which of, which AV, the which of yod, which of hand, and what, backwards starts with A, what's have, H-A-V, a have of in. The hurricane it's so, which of hand, what's have of in, a shoe. And his hand is a shoe. And affers them, and calls them, and let me refer you to another doctor here, and give you his name. And affers them whiffed, and the I-O reads as a E, and a whiff, a W-F, a whiffing. She called him a whiffing because he's smelling the shoe in his hand, and the hand what's have of in a shoe, and a fur as whiffing. She called him a shoe sniffer. And a whiffing a wits, W-I-T-S, wits, to learn, or which, and which check, the wits check, benseums, and the N followed by the E reads as a B, and seums in the blood, the blooded, and backwards. Mit, M-T, is with, the blooded with. You know, and you could tell by the smell which one was black and which one was red. And the furs a whiffin, which check ben, you know, which one it was, which check ben a seums in the blooded mit. And so it's written like this, you know, because when a shoe's reading this, he knows with this tack, this reads backwards. And so instead of this being a double S, you know, and reading a S-I, it becomes a triple S when you read this backwards and forwards. And it's, and miss, and S-S-S is a U. The third vowel in the Egyptian becomes a U, the third vowel. So the second vowel is the I, the E, and the third vowel is the U. And so it's my shoe. My shoe, you know, S and then S-U. My shoe, my shoeums in the blooded with. And in fact, you know, when you're reading it with this mark, this isn't even with anymore because you're reading the A words head on. And the blooded Adam is red. And so that's the story that's going on in the Greek book of Jacob, aka James. It's talking more about this code of the red and the black and how to read this. So in the Greek, you know, you'll see this P in there, and you know this is Pishu, which is the Greek for the ruler, or a cubit, which is 12 inches, a ruler. But this is also Mars. You know, this is Gemini, this is the twins. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and then comes Cancer, ruled by the moon, and then comes the heart, Leo, ruled by the sun, and then comes Virgo, ruled by Mercury again, and then comes Libra, ruled by Venus. You can see that's the big planet. And then comes Mars, the little bitty one out there, Scorpio. You know, you got Gemini, ruled by Mercury. You got Cancer, ruled by the moon. Then you got Leo, ruled by the sun. And then you got Virgo, ruled by Mercury again. And then you got Libra, ruled by Venus. And then you got Mars, the little bitty red planet, Scorpio. You know, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Mars, a shoe. You know, Mars, the red planet. So I'm going to cut this off here. I'll make y'all a short one. I'm sure this is very educational. And any of the Christians out there said there's no astrology in the Bible. There is nothing but astrology in the Bible. All that black writing. And if you learn how to read the red writing, then you get some medicine out of it too. Good day.